Well, nicely played. Last dynamic loft was 47. This dynamic loft, 45, 44.8. That's exactly what we said. We might be 2 degrees less, but now we have even less forward shaft lean. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're starting to turn our attention a little bit more now towards the short game. We've been focused on a lot of long game, a lot of technical things on the videos the last couple of weeks. And recently we introduced to you guys the wedge matrix, something that gives you the full repertoire of shots, really from the shortest pitch shot with your 60-degree into your full pitch and wedge at whatever that may be, 110 to 140 yards for most people, somewhere in that window. So today we're going to focus a little bit more specifically on a key yardage that I think a lot of people struggle with in their mind. Which club should I play a 50-yard wedge shot with? We have 4 wedges. Sometimes people like to pitch with even straighter face clubs than that into the irons. And it can be a little bit confusing as to which one is naturally should be the choice from 50 yards. All right, so we've got ourselves set up, nicely in the front of the green. This would be a great layup spot. This may be a layup on a par 5. It may be somewhere we've hit it in some trouble and we've laid up to a nice 50-yard number. We've got a bit of elevation. We've got just under 2.5 feet of elevation going up to the green. And we've got about 37 yards that we need to fly this 50-yard shot onto the green. So for me, this is where I want to sort of, maybe give out the lecture a little bit in this session, that I think all too often you guys are way too likely to grab your 60-degree wedge and hit this shot with a bit of a kind of one-dimensional mindset. So let me demonstrate that a little bit and maybe some of the reasons why I would caution you on doing that. Okay guys, so with 60-degree wedge, we obviously have to create a decent amount of energy in order to sort of get the ball back to the hole. I think people are very likely to put the ball back in the stance, handle forward, and hit something pretty driven. Right, really try and drive that ball in there. And that was a reasonably well struck one. But if we look at the delivery, the nature of this delivery, this is where the jeopardy of hitting that particular shot comes in. So, I use a wedge with about 8 degrees of bounce on it. And this is a 60-degree lob wedge. I've delivered 43 degrees of loft there. So I've taken that nice 60-degree loft when shaft is vertical, and I've tilted that 13 degrees forward, and now we have 43 degrees of delivered loft. Well, that 8 degrees of bounce on the bottom of my club is absolutely gone. We're actually sitting now with negative 9 degrees of bounce. So at that point where we have all of this relief, protection, whatever you want to call it, in the bounce, we can no longer use that because we are just driving that leading edge towards the ground. And this is where the heavy strike comes from, the occasional thin strike will come from, is that we're moving low point so far ahead with an 11.3 downward angle of attack that our margin for error is absolutely razor thin. We're leaving ourselves nothing really that we can get away with. If you strike it good, great. If you don't, you're in absolute terrible, terrible trouble. So we'll do that again. Handle forward, ball back, driving this one forward. Actually hit that one quite nicely. But again, I just think we're going to lose the control when we lose loft in this fashion. Again, 42 degrees of delivered loft. That's not the answer. Okay, we've mitigated all of the soul of the club. Bob Volke's worked his whole life to give you the soul of a club that you can use to your advantage. Don't do Bob wrong by not using the soul of the club. So as much as that was a lecture about how to not play the shot and how I really would encourage you not to, this is where I want to open up the discussion about maybe the different ways in which we could play it. So let's work through the clubs. I've laid out 54, I've laid out a 50, I've laid out a pitch and wedge. And let's work through this together, because ultimately we're going to use the data, we're going to use the technology. It's why it's one of the key pillars in the Fraser Golf Institute is we're actually going to use the technology here to help dictate which club that we should take. There's one thing, obviously, looking at the result, and that's great. We can look at a cluster of 10 golf balls and, go up and then do a little, sort of plot them and see how close they are, summarize that. I think we can really use the data here to tell us what we need to do. So let's go with the 54. So we don't need to have we'd never put the ball nearly as far back. We'd never lean the handle nearly as far forward. We still know that we've got to carry about 38 to 42 yards. I landed at 35. That wasn't actually that bad. I just need to be a bit more aggressive. Okay, one more time. Better. So we've landed that on 43. So let's start to reverse engineer what just happened. 11 degrees of bounce. We've got 49 degrees of delivered loft. So we've leaned that shaft 6 degrees forward. We still have bounce. I actually did hit that a bit heavy. I didn't hit that one all that good. But because I didn't move into too much shaft lean where I lose all of the bounce in the sole of the club, I didn't leave myself with a problem. The angle of attack was only 4 degrees down. So I wasn't moving low point way too far forward where I'm going to risk knifing it or chunking it. So again, I built myself a lot of sort of margin for error within that. So let me hit that one more time. I'm actually going to try and strike it a little bit better. Let's see if we can get, again, 43 yards was about where I landed that. Flip that one better, down, like that one. 43 yards again on the carry, 47 degrees of lofts, 5.8 degrees down on that time. So we've actually left ourselves 3 degrees of bounce. So if we subtract the dynamic loft from the starting loft, that basically leaves us with about 3 degrees of bounce. So we are not totally exposing the leading edge of that club. So somebody who's a neutral pitcher of the golf ball, I'm fairly neutral. I've got a little bit of a downward angle of attack. I've got a neutral club path, face is very neutral, 0-0, and I'm hitting down on it slightly. That's a really nice spot to be in. So I would say for me, before I even done this test, I knew that 55-degree wedge was the one for me. But there's going to be some of you out there that's about the formula, but some of you might get there slightly differently. So let's go to the gap wedge. Okay, so next up, and this is for you, those of you who are maybe pickers, those of you who maybe like to get a little bit more sort of release at the bottom and probably shallow out that angle of attack a little bit. So 50 degree of loft, we're probably looking again for something about 47 of dynamic, well, maybe 45 to 47. So that is already telling me I'm going to lean the shaft less at impact. So we know the magic number here is about 43 in terms of the carry. Let's see what we need to do to get that. So nicely played. Last dynamic loft was 47. This dynamic loft, 45, 44.8. It's exactly what we said. We might be 2 degrees less, but now we have even less forward shaft lean. So this is starting to work into another little sweet spot. I'd be really happy hitting 50-degree wedge from 50 yards. I don't think there's many of you watching this video would we even think about a 50-degree wedge from 50 yards. I think 80% of you would go to your lob wedge. I think 10% might go to your sand wedge. And I think some might do pitch and wedge and gap wedge, but it'd be a small amount. But I think we're starting to see why that probably shouldn't be the case, because we are seeing a sweet spot in the amount of delivered loft, the attack angle that we want, and that's given us that amount of control. I'll hit this shot one more time, but one thing I want you to watch in this next shot, and one thing I always say to people is, watch the last 3 feet of your shot. Does it roll like a putt? If it was going at the flag, is it going to go in, or is it going to either come to a screeching halt, or is it going to hit the flag and not have no chance to go in? I want you guys to hold some shots. I want it to be rolling at this comfortable pace on those last 3 feet, and I want it to look like a putt. Let's do 50 one more time. So less forward shaft lean. Ball position can even go slightly further up with this one. 43 yards. I landed that one 41 there, so I've got the 43 yards is in my mind. Not awful. I just missed my landing spot there. I talked at the very start of this video about building yourself margin for error. I made contact with that, and I guarantee it was under half a second. I knew that I had underhit it. But the amount of margin for error that I've built in for myself, that I actually got into a really nice range. I don't know what I was left with, maybe 4 feet, something like that. That's what we want, and that's what the best players in the world do really nicely. Let's move on to pitch and wedge. Okay, guys, so on to the pitch and wedge now, and this is for those of you who create a little bit more dynamic loft, maybe a little bit shallower angle of attack, people who are really comfortable with that. I actually like that. I think it's a sign that you've got great low point control. If you can go lower in loft and still have great elevation and still create a little bit of spin, I think that's a real advantage. I think you're at a disadvantage when you have to rely on loft as a crutch to create all of those sorts of things. So I love to be able to see people, get creative with a wedge and play this type of shot. So probably try and land this one about 37. One thing to keep an eye on is up in this top corner, guys, the smash factor is going up incrementally as we go from 60, 55, 50, 45. That smash factor is an energy metric that we have to manage. The more energy that we create, the more rollout the ball is going to have, obviously less spin as well. But we need to manage the fact that ball is jumping off the face a little bit more. So we just need to be a bit careful with the smash factor at this point. Okay, so that pitched at 37 yards. Hit that one reasonably well. Pushed it a little bit. Let's try one more. Make sure that's not 2 yards. So you start to see a little bit of the discomfort now. Really comfortable at 54, really comfortable at 50. Hit lovely shots at both of those. 60, I couldn't control the distance, and actually pitch and wedge, I'm not controlling the distance nicely at this one either. Give myself one more shot, but on the golf course we get one, so I don't know why I'm taking a third. Let's have a little look if we can create it one more time. Yeah, it's just that last bit. There's just too much energy, too much smash factor, too little spin. We're just not in the right spot to hit this. So we've had a little bit of experimentation with a 50-yard shot, and we've really focused it down to 2 clubs. So I'm going to say the 54 is the one, 55, I keep calling it 54. Mine is a 54-10 bent to 55-11. This is the one for me. So I think 43 yards on the fly is about bang on where I need to be with this guy. More aggressive, that's going to be really good. So I knew that was really good because I hit my number. And I've got a 55-degree wedge. I flew at 42. I know the launch and spin is good. I'm using the technology to my favor. And now as soon as I hit that, I go, good. I know I've left myself a 3-foot putt. Okay. So, guys, I think it's worth experimenting for yourselves from 50 yards. What works for you? I just don't want you putting a 60-degree wedge back of your stance, handle forward, losing all that loft. I never want you to eliminate the bounce from the equation. And you need the bounce, you need the sole in order to sort of protect you from the dig that you can often get. If you take if you add more shaft lean than you have bounce, the sole is no longer your friend. The bounce is no longer your friend. We have to make sure we have that on our side. I do want to revisit 60 one more time though. There are some players who have the ability to use 60 from this shot and actually use it in a different way. So I talked about a lot of you that I thought would put the ball back in the stance and handle forward. I'm going to use the 60 in a slightly different way that I'm actually much less bothered by or much less sort of against people doing. And that's actually having more dynamic loft and adding a little bit more speed. Okay, so for those of you who actually do want to give this a try with the 60 and maybe are very comfortable with hitting this shot, this is how I would sort of encourage you to do it. So rather than setting up like we talked about at the start with the ball position back and the handle way too far forward, we're going to neutralize that setup just a little bit. And here's the secret, here's the key to doing it. Because we know that around 55, 56 degrees of dynamic loft is going to be about the desirable number to give us the right amount of friction and the right amount of loft to carry that number. I would encourage you to open the club ever so slightly. The more we open the club, the more we expose the bounce, the more we lift the leading edge ever so slightly. We know with this shot we're going to have a steep enough angle of attack that we're not going to hit it too low in the face. Some people worried that when they open the face and they see that leading edge come up, they're going to scull it. You won't. There's enough downward with the angle of attack that you'll catch it exactly in the right spot in the head. So we want to open that fake club face ever so slightly, maybe 2 or 3 degrees, and then the ball position neutralizes more towards the middle of the stance. And the last thing that I need you to think of before you hit it is speed. I need you to think about hitting it with some sort of more aggression than some of the other shots. Clip that one nicely. Okay, so if you're going to do it like that, right? 53.5 degrees of delivered loft, 6 degrees down. Because we opened the club face, we held more bounce on there. I could really feel that club working really nicely through the strike. It certainly wasn't the leading edge digging too much, that's for sure. So not too steep, plenty of loft, plenty of bounce. That'll help you hit this shot if you do want to go to the 60. Hard going, I'll be honest. You know, that's versus how easy it was for me to pitch the 55 in and let that last little bit just run towards the hole. 60 is just too high tariff for so many of you out there. Again, those of you, there'll be times that you go, no, I'm really comfortable with it. Great, no problem at all. This video is probably not for you then. But the rest of you, I would love for you to explore your gap wedge and your sand wedge for the 50-yard shot. I think you'll get such a higher rate of success. And when you miss-hit it, when you miss-strike it, you're going to find that your misses are much, much closer. You shrink that proximity down really, really significantly. So, guys, the 50-yard shot is something that you should have a game plan for, right? And we've got 2 shots here. We've got the 38-yard carry distance with the 50 degree, and it rolls out really nice the last 12 yards. Or we grab the 55 and we fly it another 5 yards, go 43 yards or 44 yards, and we let it kind of trickle out the last 5 or 6 yards. That's how I would sort of encourage you guys to play this particular shot. So let us know if this is something that you struggle with. Let us know if maybe if you're coming back to the video and you haven't watched it, and what worked for you. Which of the 4 clubs that we're demonstrating today worked best for you. I'd love to hear your own thoughts and experiences when it comes to this shot. And if you enjoyed the video, as always, guys, hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to the channel. We want to make sure all of you are with us here on the journey to Fraser Golf Institute. All right, stay tuned for more. We'll see you again soon.